It is the Blue Room. It's your weekly show on a Thursday this week after Everton played on Wednesday. And I'm joined by, no doubt, two very happy Evertonians from the Liverpool Echo, Adam Jones. Adam, how are you, mate?
I'm very good. Yeah, good performance last night. So yeah, good mood.
And Mick Greenall as well. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, still recovering from 2 clean sheets in a row.
Unbelievable, isn't it? Unbelievable. But before we get into all that, Adam Jones was just telling us before we came on air. Then he cooked Christmas dinner for himself and his colleague Sam Carroll, and it wasn't without incident, mate. Put it that way.
No, it was literally the first thing I did as well. Like I had to buy a new veg peeler, and it had like a plastic thing over the like actual blade. So I was washing it, and I hadn't took the plastic thing off, and I went, "Oh, I've got to take this plastic thing off." And when I went to take the plastic thing off, I've essentially just sliced my fingertip off.
So it was Christmas dinner with your blood.
well, I had to do it one-handed from that point on, which was quite the challenge.
Oh, nightmare. Have you ever cooked a Christmas dinner, Mick?
Yeah, I have actually with uni. I mean, everything ends up getting burnt, but it still looks nice, to be honest. I've never ended up cutting myself though, so.
Fair enough.
He's one step ahead.
It's plastered up, a little bit like his wrist injury last night. But yeah, we'll move on to have a chat about the game. Just first and foremost, actually, lads, I wanted to ask you, if you were part of an Everton team that won 2-0 away at Leicester, in the makeshift dressing room afterwards, would you be Mason Holgate stood up on a chair with your kecks around your ankles? Or would you be Dominic Calvert-Lewin singing into the microphone?
I'd like to think I'd be Alex Iwobi filming it all, to be honest. But out of those two options, I think I'd have to be Mason Holgate, because that's hilarious, isn't it? I love that.
Is that what you like at the Echo Christmas parties? Yeah, on a chair, kecks on?
Yeah. It's probably for the best that we can't do one this year.
What about you, Mike?
I think I would have been Niels and Kunku, just sitting there soaking everything in. To be honest, just enjoying it.
Was he on the videos? Was he? I didn't see him.
Yeah. I think
he's just
the one where Calvert-Lewin's singing on the microphone, because obviously they must be in like the press conference room or something. He's just sitting on the manager's chair, just like turning around, just enjoying himself.
Yeah. I wasn't watching them thinking, there's no way Carlo's in that room there.
No.
He's definitely gone out to do his media briefing. And then as soon as he walks back in, everyone's going to turn the music.
Back it all up.
back it all in.
It's like when the teacher's just gone out the room for a little bit, isn't it? And you just have a bit of a party. And then they walk back in and you're like, shh.
Oh, yeah, I love that. But I think it's indicative of how important that win was. And I was sort of thinking about this before we came on tonight, lads, and how I sort of felt after that Burnley game. And it sort of felt then that Everton, and even at that point, had maybe wasted that good start to the season. The feel-good factor had completely gone. And, it was a draw at Burnley. It wasn't the worst result in the world in the grand scheme of things, but it just felt like things were really unraveling for this group of lads and this manager. And in the space of 5 days, my word, they've given the season a massive injection of momentum, haven't they? And I think, it's not just the way in which it's not just the fact that they've won games. I think it's the fact that they've won games in a way which is completely different to what we've seen from them at any point in the season. It's almost like all of a sudden this clip that, we're going to be defensively solid, we're going to snuff out really good attacking sides, and we're going to be dead clinical when we get our own chances as well.
I think it's interesting when you look back at Carlo Ancelotti's comments after that Burnley game. He was quite upbeat about the performance in general. Like, obviously, the individual error early in the game aside, and then when Fabian Delph went off injured, we had obviously that switch in formation, change in system to bring Ben Godfrey over to left back, and we looked a lot more solid from that point on. I think Carlo Ancelotti was very keen to highlight that after the Burnley game, which obviously we didn't really pick up on at the time because we had just drawn 1-1 with Burnley. It was a disappointing result, but perhaps in that second half, how defensively solid they were. They have managed to take that into the Chelsea game and now into the Leicester game as well. And, I've said for years that I just think the best teams are built on a strong defensive foundation. And that's obviously something that Carlo Ancelotti's been trying to find for a long time. We thought he had it just after that period, just after lockdown, when, funnily enough, it was that 4-4-2 again. We got that 0-0 against Liverpool, and we were thinking to ourselves, we might have stumbled upon the defensive system for us now. And it just didn't really work out like that, of course. And then the 4-3-3, while it was very, very good going forward, I think there were always weaknesses at the back. So it's really interesting to see Everton playing in this sort of stoic defensive sort of style. I'm not sure how long it's going to last, especially when you've got the likes of Seamus Coleman surely going to come back into the side. That's going to disrupt things a little bit. I think losing Alan in front of that back four as well yesterday, that's going to be a big miss depending on who we bring in to replace him, of course, if we're going to keep that system. So hopefully we've got contingencies that we can modify this over the next few weeks. But I think, the last two games in particular, that's going to be what Carlo Ancelotti's focusing on, more than the two wins. It's those clean sheets that are going to really please him, I think.
Yeah, Mick, they're the bedrock of all this, aren't they? Finding that defensive cohesion has been, it felt like even in that Burnley game at times, it was absolutely miles off. And he's just stumbled upon something that works really well, hasn't he, in the last two?
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, I thought this is what Ancelotti's Everton was always going to look like. I think, be conservative, be really well drilled, all about game management and stuff like that, and nicking games here and there, because that's how you pick up points, I suppose. As we saw that at the start of the calendar year when I think it must have been. I'm trying to think. Was it Newcastle we faced that first away game? It wasn't really spectacular, but we went there and we sort of just controlled the game basically. And sometimes that's what you need against those type of teams, to be, you don't need to be over expansive. You don't need to, shoot yourself in the foot. And, the start of the season, we've been everything I thought we wouldn't be. We've been ultra attacking, overloading all everywhere and leaving ourselves vulnerable. And, almost, enforced on us. We became a bit more conservative. We've been not negative as such, but we've realised that sometimes you've just got to, you can't just attack all the time. And maybe this, obviously, against Chelsea and against Leicester, you can't do that. And I think the Arsenal game, on Saturday will be a big show of, what's the next step now? Like, are we going to stick with being a bit more, conservative, or are we, especially if James comes back into it, are we going to, go at them again and see what we saw earlier on in the season? I think it's obviously you've got to try and find the middle ground, haven't you? As much as last night was a fantastic, a good performance, you don't want to be having 30% possession every week. I mean, I suppose you're winning every week, it doesn't really matter, but there are going to be games where, where against your Burnleys and against, your West Hams and stuff like that, where they're going to do what we did to Leicester, and so, you have the ball and we're going to hit you on the break when you, overcommit. But I think the last two games, I think even the second half against Burnley, as much as, it wasn't perfect, there were signs there that, we're going in the right direction at least. And I suppose, we're only 12 months in. I don't know. Is it 12 months today or something? Or
it's tomorrow?
Is it tomorrow?
Adam probably knows his best for those, yeah. But
I thought it was like next week at some point, to be honest. I thought it was like the 22nd.
I know his first game was Boxing Day, wasn't it? Mm. But it's at the moment, we're only 12 months in. It's all about, baby steps, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think the encouraging thing for me, Adam, and I was quite scathing about them in regards to this on the Burnley game, saying that the name of the game this season, I think for every side, I think the team that ultimately wins the league and the teams that finish in the top four will be the ones that adapt the best, because everyone's going to get injuries. Everyone's going to have to make do in a season which is just like one we've never seen before. And I think teams that can change the system, change the players, and just manage to scrape through are going to do really well. And it did feel as though sort of like Richarlison getting sent off in that derby was like pulling on a thread, and the tapestry just sort of crumbled in front of us. And it was like, well, this team doesn't look like it's got it in them to adapt. But the last few weeks, whether it's by design or by a bit of luck, they have found a way, haven't they, to sort of just get through that. And I think if they're going to stay up there and stay in the race for a top four spot, if they're going to stay in cup competitions, then that's going to be dead important.
I think it'd be really interesting to see like what the players thought the tipping point was. I personally think the tipping point was probably that Leeds game, getting beat by Leeds, and Holgate was out after the game saying, "Oh well, we thought every time they attacked us, we just had to go and attack them," and that's just not the way we should be playing football matches, to be honest, especially with the team that we had out on the day. And you mentioned obviously that Richarlison sending off, and I think that was probably the first time that we'd had a really big player. Obviously Dean was missing as well for a game after that, but that was the first time we'd really had a big player missing this season, and it was up to then the rest of the squad to kind of step up in his absence. Bernard, Alex Iwobi, anybody who was going to get picked in that position. And you know, it's always going to be difficult for anybody to be a like-for-like replacement for Richarlison in that system. I think any team in the Premier League is going to struggle to replace Richarlison like-for-like in that system. But I just don't think that the players that Everton did call upon on that time really stood up to the mark. Whereas over the last couple of games, you've seen Gylfi Sigurdsson stepping back into the team. I think he's helped massively that he's playing in his natural position, of course, but he's certainly stepped up to the mark. You know, he's putting in that energy rate that we were seeing a couple of seasons ago and that we were lauding him for a couple of seasons ago. Alex Iwobi over the last few games has been absolutely fantastic, in my opinion. You know, he's been versatile. He'll just play wherever the manager wants him to, right wing back, left wing back. I think he was swapping flanks with Richarlison last night as well, just to try and break down Leicester any way that he could. And I think, you know, again, the energy that he's been putting into his performances has been really, really good to see. So
you'd be glad to know, Adam, that Mick is the chairman of the Alex Iwobi Ultras. So
is he?
Yeah, surely we'd like to have a chat about him in a bit.
Well, I just think he's indicative of, you know, squad members stepping up to the plate, and you know that's exactly what we need. And you know, we're going to need it again now that Alan's injured. Of course, we're going to need somebody to step up to the plate in that midfield and prove why they're part of this Everton squad. Because I think you're right in what you're saying, that essentially the team that's going to be the most consistent and the most adaptable is going to win the Premier League. Now, Everton aren't going to win the Premier League, but if we're going to be in the shout for a top 4 place or a European place, we still need to be somewhat consistent and adaptable in these sort of scenarios. So we can't just have a good starting 11. We do have to have a good 17, 18, 19 players. So it's going to be really interesting to see, you know, which players do step up over the next few weeks, because it's such a busy schedule. Carlo's going to have to rotate in essentially every position, I'd say. So it's going to be really interesting to see who passes the test.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of them, isn't it? We look at Sigurdsson and Iwobi, and when they come into the side, it seems like we have the same sorts of conversations all the time. Well, you know, these lads have got to show what they can do now. It's their opportunity, and you've got to seize it. And while that might still be the case, I suppose it's hard, isn't it, to come into a team that's functioning in a particular way. In the case of Sigurdsson, certainly a team that isn't playing, you know, doesn't even have that role which you consider your best role, and you've got to adapt a little bit. So perhaps it's no surprise that these lads have been slow to get up to speed in recent weeks. But now we're looking at a situation there where Sigurdsson's played 2 games in a row. Iwobi, I think, has probably played, you know, probably his 5th game in a row, isn't he? He's played now, you know, and those lads all of a sudden are looking a bit more settled, a bit fitter, and a bit more in tune with the teammates.
Yeah, I think as fans, and I think Ancelotti has this problem, but I think football in general has the problem, is that when it comes to squad players, it can be very tough for them to get opportunities, but it can be very easy for them to, you know, get thrown back out the side again. I think that's probably been one of Iwobi's, particularly, has been one of his biggest problems in his first, you know, 18 months as an Everton player. There's the lack of consistency just hasn't been there. And in fairness, as much as I like him, he's not done himself favours at times. He really hasn't. Like, he'll be fantastic one week and he'll be generally awful the next week. And when you look at it like that, you can't keep on giving players those chances, because I suppose when you're Ancelotti, you've got to be able to trust players. But I think over the last couple of weeks, I think that's why we haven't seen Bernard. I think that's why we haven't seen Gomez as frequently. He's starting to trust, he's starting to trust Iwobi, he's starting to trust Sigurdsson. I wish he'd start to trust Niels and Nkunku, but I don't think we're going to see that in a while. But I think, maybe that's what, and Nkunku particularly, and Gordon as well, you've got to, when you get that opportunity, because it will happen. It will happen. We'll have a cup game against Rotherham in January, and you'd expect both of them to play. And when that chance comes, even if it's 10, 20 minutes off the bench, in the next couple of games, because I suppose that will happen as well, they've really got to grab that opportunity, and they've got to prove to Ancelotti, especially not just going forward and pressing, that way, but from a defensive side of things to do the dirty work. And I think it was a big statement last night that, with 5 minutes to go, it was Anthony Gordon who came on, and it wasn't Bernard. And it wasn't John Joe Kenny, albeit he came on afterwards. This is a 19-year-old winger who, he isn't going to be renowned if he ends up being a first-team player for his defensive responsibility, unless he's some sort of Richarlison who, despite the last 2 games, has been criticised by commentators for not tracking back enough.
We should crazy, isn't he?
I know, like, I never gets off. Never gets off.
Carry that lad every single week, don't we?
Yeah.
But like, I think that was a big statement. I know he's only on for like 5-10 minutes, but I think that was a sign really of getting those minutes as that type of player. You've got to really take that opportunity. And in fairness to Iwobi and in fairness to Sigurdsson, especially in the last 2 games, they've been quite impressive, like quietly impressive. They've not been spectacular and they've not done anything, out of the ordinary, but they've been confident and they've been sensible. And sometimes, especially when you're playing Chelsea and Leicester, that's all you need to be.
Yeah, I think sensible is a sort of great way to sum it up, actually. And I think Adam, in regards to the away games this season, in all of them to a degree, late on when we've been ahead, we've had to hang on a little bit. And when you're in there watching the games, I think Crystal Palace at times it felt like, oh no, we're going to concede in. And then afterwards you sort of go, we were all right there. Fulham was a little bit like that as well, wasn't it? Where they piled on the pressure a bit after they got that second goal, but there wasn't really any saves for Jordan Pickford. But I don't know. Last night I didn't even get myself to that point where I thought, we're in trouble here and Leicester are pinning us back. It felt like Mike said there. I think that's a great way to describe it. Everyone just did the sensible thing, whether it was just holding onto the ball at the right time, playing the ball forward at the right time, winning a free kick at an opportune moment, and even to the point where Mason Holgate just scored at the perfect time to just completely relieve any sort of pressure. And I think against the side that, let's be honest, is packed with attacking quality. That midfield they've got of Ndidi and Tielemans in particular is outstanding and one of the best in the Premier League. To be able to come out of that game and go, well, actually, they didn't really have everything pinned back for any point in the game. It's a testament to the defensive work, but I think it's a testament to how, again, using that word, sensible Everton were with the football when they got it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, am I right in saying that Leicester didn't have a shot on target in the second half?
Yeah, that's right.
A bit like Chelsea. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a welcome change, isn't it? Because a couple of years ago we'll have been sat here on these podcasts going, "Oh, when are Everton going to win an away game again?" Because Everton's away form had just been absolutely shocking, and Carlo Ancelotti's just came in and just went, "I'm changing that." And since Carlo Ancelotti's come in, so something's clicked in their heads, and somehow they're able to go and, as you rightly say, be sensible in these sort of away games. We didn't need to go all out attacking against Leicester. We just needed to get our feet on the ball, control the possession as much as we possibly could. I know we didn't have a lot of it, but keep Leicester in the right areas essentially, and that's what they did all the way through. I do have to say, when Gomez gave away that penalty, which obviously wasn't a penalty, I was thinking to myself at that point, don't let this go now. We've done so well. It would just be very Everton to have given it away in that sort of way. But no, apart from that, I think it was just a very composed and mature performance. And against a side like Leicester, as you say, they're going to be challenging for these European places as well. We essentially should be considering Leicester as a direct rival for these places, and to go there and pretty comfortably beat them on their own turf. I know their home form's not been amazing so far this season, but still, I think it's a worthwhile achievement, and it's something that Everton should be looking to recreate throughout the season now, and just go into these sort of away games, even against sides that are below us, and just go, right, okay, we're going to just control this game as much as possible, pick up 1-0 wins here and there, 2-1s, and anything to just get 3 points on the board. And I think that's what's going to be the important thing when we get towards the latter stages of this season.
It's the kind of footy you've just got to play, isn't it? In this time of year, you can't. If you've got a game every 3 days, you're not going to be free flowing and dead sharp all the time. You're going to have to just tough it out sometimes. And I think that the lad actually, Mike, who summed it up probably best for me last night, and amongst a lot of good performances, was Abdoulaye Doucouré. And it's going back to that ability to adapt, because I think this season he's had to do a few different jobs, but I think he's been at his best when he's been allowed to get forward a little bit more and, carry the ball, get into the box and sort of link up from an attacking point of view. But he had to adapt a lot in that second half last night when Alan goes off just before half time with that injury, because, while it's not entirely his game, of him and Andre Gomez, he's the more defensively dynamic footballer, more defensively switched on footballer. And he really had to adapt in that regard. And before half time, he wins a really important tackle on Vardy. He does the same thing in the second half as well. And he just swept up absolutely everything in front of that back four.
Yeah, it was such an intelligent performance, really. I think, Guys, it was annoying actually because when Alan went off, I thought Alan was fantastic in the first 35, 40 minutes, but you know, injuries happen, I suppose. But after that, the Corey he was, he was everything in that game that we thought we were going to get. Do you know what I mean? He was everywhere. Remember when we had McCarthy and Barry, and we'd say about McCarthy about he'd cover every blade of grass. But,
title there, mate. Yeah.
But he was everywhere, and I think if that was last season and we had a player like Alan and Alan have to go off, and then we'd end up being, it would have most likely ended up being a midfield two of Gomez and Sigurdsson. Without obviously hindsight's a wonderful thing, but we probably would have ended up losing that game because you've got no one in the middle to really just break things up and be a bit more, like I said before, be sensible about things and being in the right place at the right time. And it's not like he was just sat in front of the back four and controlled like their attack. Basically, he was still venturing forward, and I think he's going to have a big role in the next few weeks of Alan out because the injury it didn't look great. He was on crutches last night from the pitches, which I hope it's just a pulled hamstring. I hope he's not torn anything or anything like that. Because I suppose we've got Kabama back in a few weeks, but no one has a clue what he's going to be like. He could be as much as I liked him in Germany. You have two big serious injuries, you can be a completely different player. But I think he's going to be massive to how this team performs in the next month or so. And I think, I hope Davies gets an opportunity. I think it's a big month for him. Like I said before about trust, he's got to, hopefully we're in a situation where he gets given a game. I doubt he'll play on Saturday, but maybe he comes in one of the next couple of games and he earns the trust. And then when Alan comes back, we've got players fighting for shirts again because that's what we need. But solely on Decore, I thought last night, I thought he was excellent against Fulham and Brighton. But I think last night was the game that really thought, this is why we bought you. And I think, it's another good sign, and hopefully these type of like performances from him and the rest of the players, obviously Godfrey, came in as well. Hopefully the rest of these players are really just going to take us up a level now. And like I said, when Alan comes back, hopefully these players are going to have a fight to just get back in the team. I remember seeing on Twitter last night, would you put Hammers back in on Saturday? And 40% of people said no. I was like, bloody hell, it's amazing what 2 wins does for us.
You've had a comment on this LMC 247 saying, I can't believe he's never Tony, and I'm wondering how James Rodriguez gets back into this team. Everyone is putting in a shift, but that's not his game. But just staying with the Corey a little bit, Adam. Obviously, you weren't on your usual player ratings duty last night. Would he have been your man of the match if you were doing it?
Yeah, I agree with Sam. He would have got a 9 from me because I think that the most impressive thing about his performance is that he seemed everywhere, but it wasn't because he was sprinting around like a headless chicken. It's just his positioning was spot on every single time. Whenever Leicester were putting those low crosses into the box, it seemed to be just going straight to Decore, and he was just going, thank you, and just progressing up the pitch with it from that point on. And then I thought his passing accuracy was really good. I think, obviously Michael's talked about those tackles back in the box on Jamie Vardy as well. Like it was a complete sort of midfielder's performance, and I think he did have to modify his game a little bit when Alan went off. But I think he did that perfectly to accommodate somebody like Andre Gomez coming in. I agree that I think maybe Tom Davis would suit being next to Decore a little bit better. I think he's probably a bit closer in profile to what Alan would have. So I think it'd be interesting to see him in that Arsenal game rather than Man United game, because I think the United game's a bigger game. I'd rather give Davis his chance against the Arsenal, a bit of a depleted Arsenal at that, in front of the fans of Goodison again. I think it's going to be the perfect chance for him to try and show what he can do next to Decore. But yeah, I think Decore was probably by far and away man of the match, but I don't think anybody had a bad game. And it was like that against Chelsea. Like there was nobody that you could pick out and go, he didn't really play that well. Like, literally every single player had a really good game, and I think you're not going to get many of those performances a season. So I think we probably need to make as much of them as we can.
Yeah, And I think it's, that's probably emphasised by the fact that we haven't even mentioned either of the goal scorers tonight on this podcast. The first one I want to speak about in particular, and I'm really glad that you two lads are on, actually, because Mike, obviously you're very much, invested in the statistical side and the data side of football. Adam, you've been in the media and, look at how players are spoken about and the perceptions a lot. This thing about Richarlison is just starting to do my head in now. I think it's a couple of times, it started off effectively with Jamie Carragher against Leeds, sort of making that throwaway comment about him. And it just seems to have grown and grown and grown since then, up until the point where the analysis around him during the game last night, I thought was just wrong, just completely and utterly wrong, but based on what you could see with your eyes and what the numbers say as well. And then to hear a former Everton captain in Phil Neville afterwards to trot out stereotypes about South American footballers, about a lad who doesn't really tick any of those boxes, really, was really disappointing as well. Especially, I think, I'll come to you first on this one, Adam, especially after he just scored the opening goal in a really important game for Everton. Ran his bollocks off all night, won loads of important free kicks, took a few kicks, went off and had his wrist bandaged and came back on, and just kept on going and going and going. I just felt as though, having watched that and seen that, how can you come to those conclusions about a player that is just, those conclusions which could not be more at odds of what he's all about?
It's madness, isn't it? I just think it's hugely unfair. I think it's coming from, I think it just smacks of punditry from people who don't watch him every week, because you can't watch him every week and have these perceptions about Richarlison. I don't understand it at all. Like, you're quite right. The Phil Neville thing probably annoyed me more than anything else, because I've kind of weirdly just got used to co-commentators just saying, "Oh, he's always on the floor." Like, whatever, he's always fouled. Like, that's why he's always on the floor. And until people realise that, then it's always going to be the case. I think Jack Grealish probably suffers from something similar though, and I think he's probably one of, if not the most foul players in the Premier League. So, there's obviously a reason why these players are on the floor all the time. But to hear Phil Neville come out and say, "Oh, well, he plays well at the start of the season when it's warm, and then when it gets to the middle months, he doesn't really play as well." What evidence have you got to support that? I don't understand it at all. Like, I just think Richarlison just has this reputation for some reason as this player who is temperamental, and he's aggressive, and he goes down too easily, and then he doesn't score enough goals. And no Everton fan thinks like that. If Richarlison had played for the 3 games that he had been suspended, Everton might be 2nd or 3rd in the league. That's how influential he is to this team, and that's how consistently influential he is to this team. Even when he's not on the score sheet, he's the one who's making all those dangerous runs. He's the one who always looks one of our most creative players. As you say, he makes more tackles than any other forward in the Premier League, doesn't he? Yeah. He is just a constant ball of energy, whether it's July or whether it's December. I just don't understand the reputation that he's got, to be honest. And I was really disappointed to hear that something like that coming from Phil Neville, because it just shouldn't be the case. And I think it's probably got to the point where Carlo Ancelotti might have to just start standing up for Richarlison at any point that he can. I think Marco Silva hit that point towards, I think, was it his 2nd season? Like, he was hitting the point where, like, Richarlison's not diving. Like, it kept being a point of press conferences. I think it might be getting to that point for Carlo Ancelotti. Any other player goes into yesterday's game, scores the opening goal, brings to an end a kind of a goal scoring drought, but scores the opening goal in the way that he did, works his socks off as he did, as you say, got injured and come back on, played through the pain barrier. Any other player would have been getting huge amounts of praise for that, but they just completely glossed over that in the post-match analysis. It was all just about why hasn't he been scoring more goals more often this season, and blah blah blah. It's tiresome. It's really tiresome, and it was really disappointing to see. And hopefully we'll start to see that change in soon, but I just can't see how that's going to happen, to be honest.
What did you make of it, Mick?
So this is a good example of why after the game finishes, I turn telly off.
Yeah.
but from what I've gathered, like I know Rob's had quite a go in the post match, but it just smacks of it, just screams of lazy punditry, and that's what it is. And I think Adam said there about sometimes it's understandable from commentators. Not that it happens all the time, but I suppose when you're up there and you just sometimes speak what you think straight away. But when you it was Phil Neville and it was Emil Heskey last night as well, weren't it? You basically got 90 minutes to think about what you're going to say, and after watching him perform for nearly the vast majority of the game, scores the first goal, nearly probably has fractured his wrist, gets kicked everywhere. It's another example of him being combative. He's everywhere all game, and then you pick up in the post-match reaction and talk about how he's on the floor all the time. Like, if it was been a game where he'd done nothing and he'd had a proper stinker, he'd missed maybe a few chances, or he just wasn't involved at all, but he was still getting kicked everywhere, then maybe you pick up, he was on the floor everywhere and he all the time, and he wasn't helping the team. But it's just lazy. Do you know what I mean? People know other people say it, and therefore that's what they say as well. And Matt mentioned about it's really started since Carragher mentioned it against the Leeds game after he got clattered by the goalkeeper. Yeah. It must have been straight after that where it was a 50-50. He hadn't dived or anything like that. And he's thrown that comment out really, and it's just stuck. And it's just it's just garbage. It's just garbage. I think I'm not sure. Someone mentioned it before about in the Guardian Weekly. They were talking about has Richarlison been worth the £50 million we spent on him, and it's like do your research. Do you know what I mean?
Get for him now.
Yeah.
150 probably.
Yeah. He might not have been. He's not having like the best season in terms of scoring, but look at all you got to do is look at the stats where we've not won without him since he signed. As much as that's not the most like.
Sorry to interrupt me. That's the annoying thing. Like there's a dead recent example. Of 3 games he's not played for Everton, and they were awful. So if you're a pundit and you're doing Everton's games and you look back at what's happened over the last few weeks, that's where it's dead obvious. And you say, well, he wasn't involved in those games, and Everton were actually pretty crap about him. And since he's come back in, he's not been perfect, but he's been a lot better.
Yeah, 90 seconds. He was out for 3 games, come back in for the Fulham game within 90 seconds, wins the ball back, dribbles into the box and sets up a goal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose you could do without.
Yeah, it really wound me up last night.
Yeah.
I think Clinton Morrison had definitely been typing his own name to Twitter as well when he moved on to the other flank. And he was saying, "Oh yeah, people were saying I was wrong about Richarlison, but look, Carlo Ancelotti swapped sides with swapped into Alex Iwobi's side." It was like, yeah, I'm not entirely sure that's why, Clinton. But anyway, we'll move on from that. Just final thing on that game, actually. Adam, is Mason Holgate now the new knee sliding champion for Everton after the celebration last night?
It was glorious, wasn't it? Yeah. I was a huge fan of that. We've got a team of good knee sliders, to be fair. I think Sigurdsson's got a really good knee slide on him.
He did a good he did a good exact corner at Leicester when he scored that goal.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So
Lukaku did one in that corner as well, didn't he? On a Boxing Day a few years ago.
Is that the corner in the Premier League that's got the best knee slides ever?
It must be. It's something in the corner.
That must move a silk down that end. Yeah, but made up for Mason as well, of course. You can see how much you meant to him. Just final 10 minutes, lads, before we wrap up. Arsenal on Saturday. Mike, you've been sort of speaking about this a little bit in one of our groups today as well. I think there'll be changes for this, and I think I probably would make a couple of changes if I was the manager, certainly ahead of that United game. And I think what's dead interesting is how Everton approach this in regards to they're not playing Leicester or Chelsea, who are flying high in the table. They're playing a team that's big in reputation, have got some good players, but let's be honest, they are on their knees at the moment. The manager's under massive pressure. They've got a couple of key players out through suspension, and they're coming to Goodison Park. Do you stick with this defensive approach and outlook that served us so well over the last couple of games, or is there a sense of Everton should sensible deal and go at Arsenal early on?
I really want us to go for I really want us to go for them. I said it a couple of weeks ago. I think it must have been when they were playing Villa, but I really fancy us to put 3 or 4 past them, to be honest. I'm probably too confident. I've been really nervous for the Chelsea and the Leicester game, and we're coming into this Arsenal one. And this is a massive opportunity. And I know they're having a poor season, but it's still Arsenal. They're still, a Sky Big Six team. It's a massive opportunity to make a statement. Do you know what I mean? To say that these last 2 fixtures, they weren't just they're not like the first 4 games of the season where they're not a fluke. Do you know what I mean? And we're not just gonna end up whittling away, which you might do in the end of the season. But right now we're going to be in and around the top 4, and if we can end up, even if we just win 1-0, but put in a really good performance where we really, batter them, we create chances after chances. As much as I'd like, I suppose it doesn't really matter how we perform as long as we win. But, I feel like from a performance point of view, after the last 2 games, this is an opportunity to really just play with a bit more freedom. They're not going to have Gabriel. Hopefully, probably going to be playing David Luiz in the centre back. Hopefully, we can just go out there and punish them. Because, like I said, it's still Arsenal at the end of the day. And if we can go and get 2 or 3 goals, even if we don't keep a clean sheet, I know we've had 2 clean sheets in the last 2 games. Now I'm not that fussed anymore. I want us to go start scoring goals.
Want the free flow and swashbuckle?
Yeah, I want us to go back. But yeah, I think it's a big chance for us, and hopefully, especially if James comes back as well. If I was Arsenal, I wouldn't want to be playing us this weekend. But I think I said that last time. I think we just won 4 in a row. Me and Dave were on, and you'd said, would you take 5 or 7 points out the next 3 games? And me and we were like, no, we'll have 9, and we lost 3 in a row. So.
What about you, Ad? Different approach, you think, of this game or not?
I can't help but think a little bit more pragmatic, to be honest. Like, I've just seen how well we've defended over the last couple of games, and I just think to myself, all of the pressure is on Arsenal. Like, all of the hype is around them and how badly they're playing. I think just essentially sit back and let them make mistakes with the footy.
That could be that sort of thing.
Yeah, essentially they're just not good. They're not playing well at the minute. Give them the ball, wait for them to make mistakes, punish them when they do. I just feel like we've got ourselves the perfect now defensive setup where they shouldn't really cause us many problems. I'm still a bit uneasy about the pace of Aubameyang, especially if he's going to play through the middle. Like, there might be a bit of an issue there if we don't switch personnel around a little bit. But I think aside from that, I just think we've got a defensive system there that's just going to frustrate Arsenal. And if we keep them frustrated for the first 15 minutes of the game, those mistakes are going to start coming. Because, as I say, the pressure is on them. The pressure's on Arteta as well. They're going to be going all out to try and beat us, I think. And I think they're just going to leave. They're going to leave gaps at the back. And when we've got Calvert-Lewin up top, and if he's going to be playing against David Luiz, you're gonna fancy Calvert-Lewin in that duel. You've got Richarlison to hit them on the break. Depending on personnel, whether James is fit or not. I think you've either got James to exploit them in terms of creative passing, or you've got Alex Iwobi to run directly at them and cause them problems in that sense. So I think if we set ourselves up to be a counter-attacking force again, then I just think we can frustrate Arsenal, and even if it's a defensive setup, I still think we could score 3 or 4 against them if we do that, because they are playing that badly at the minute.
Go on, Mick. We're going to make a point there, mate.
Yeah, I suppose from a more neutral or objective point of view, from watching Arsenal quite a bit this season, when teams kind of just sit back and let them have the ball, they can often appear to be quite quite clueless and quite vulnerable on the counter-attack. And I think maybe that's what, from a tactical point of view, we should just not just set up to frustrate them, but almost be like, Ron, you have the ball. We know you're not that good at trying to break teams down. We've seen, or heard even the comments about Arteta trying to lash in crosses consistently, which, as much as that can be effective at times when you've got Michael Keane and Yerry Mina, they effectively are the type of things they want to be dealing with. They don't want to be dealing with runners in behind or anything like that. If you get the ball out wide and throw crosses in, you could say the same for Godfrey and the same for Holgate. That's their bread and butter. So if we almost let them do that and then go, right then, you're not going to get much out of us that way. You've got to be a bit more creative. And I don't think, you look at their midfield without Ozil, there's not a lot of creativity in there.
Well, and I think Thomas Partey's injured and Jack is suspended as well. So
that's what I knew. I knew someone else was out Partey, of course. but it's almost like just frustrate them and then hit them on the break. You know, it's changed me tune in 5 minutes there, haven't I?
Adam's talking into a more negative way of...
well, let's not say negative. Let's not say negative.
Yeah.
We could still beat them 5-0 like that.
Yeah, of course. Sensible.
Yeah.
Loving the optimism here. Do you know what the encouraging thing though? I've sort of been thinking about this today is, you know, I think whatever way everything go about it, they've got the tools to beat Arsenal. I just think, they're better than Arsenal at the moment in the way, you know, they've got a world-class striker. We've got one which isn't far off maybe that level, but other than that, I think Everton are better than them in a lot of different areas of the pitch. So got a better manager as well, dare I say. This is all going to come back to bite me on Saturday, mate. But just a couple of other questions going into this one. The obvious one, I'll come to you first on this one, Mick. Alan not going to be available for the game, barring some miracle. I'm sure Carlo will confirm he's out tomorrow. How would you set up a midfield?
I think I'd like to see Davies come in, but I don't think that will happen. I have a feeling Coleman might be back because even if he's not completely 100% fit, I think Ancelotti will want him to play on Wednesday against United, and I don't think throwing him into a game of that magnitude straight away would be sensible, even if he just plays 65 minutes on Saturday, which means then, you know, Holgate is free. Whether he goes out to left back, I don't know, because I'd like to see Godfrey in midfield at one point, but maybe Godfrey or Holgate slide into midfield and effectively the system doesn't change. I was worried last night that maybe this is Alan's injury ends up forcing us to go to a back three again, which could happen. It could happen.
Surely not. Surely we can't go back to that again.
Yeah, but I mean, I'd rather us not, to be honest. I don't think trying to go like for like and just pushing Decore back and putting Gomez in there is the right decision either. So hopefully Coleman's back, and then that should free up Holgate really to just push into midfield.
On Andre Gomez, I don't think his performance sort of split opinion last night. He came on the post. I just thought he did very well. I didn't think he played too well at all when he came on in the game. But do you look at someone like him and think in the same way that Sigurdsson and Iwobi have benefited from minutes and a regular spot in the side, that maybe if we're going to give someone that prolonged opportunity, then he might be the best bet?
Well, yeah, I think in the first few games of the season, I think he proved that he could be really effective in that midfield three that we had. And I think, you know, he had a very defined role in that midfield three, and he lived up to that very well. I just think that in a midfield two, I think we've already seen his shortfalls towards the back end of last season. And, you know, obviously he wasn't the only one in our midfield, but who had that issue. But I don't think that he can come in to that exact same role that Alan can. I agree with Mike. I think, you know, Tom Davies is the better fit for that. But I also agree that I just can't see Tom Davies being trusted to do that for some reason. You know, he'd be my choice. I'd really want to see that happen. But I just can't shake the feeling that he's going to try and get James into this team somehow. And I just don't see how you can drop Iwobi or Sigurdsson. So it might be the case that Sigurdsson moves back and James comes into where Sigurdsson was playing. Yeah. I feel like that might be the way that he tries to get James back into the team. This is if he's fit, of course. I'm just presuming that he's going to be fit. But yeah, if James isn't fit, I'd like to see Davies. But yeah, I can see a situation where it'd be like Holgate / Godfrey in that midfield, which I wouldn't be opposed to, I suppose. But it's not ideal at all.
Absolutely. We'll do a few comments and questions and we'll wrap up. Jem Mace has said, I agree with Mike. I think the balance has been found now. I'd take caution over a Gunko approach and see more points on the board, the more entertaining but risky football. Tim Evans on the Richarlison stuff, I think it's just lazy punditry. They're paid to have an opinion, but fortunately they don't watch Everton very often, so come across as clueless. AA FIFA 2000, you guys reckon you'll beat Arsenal easily? We'll ask that question in a little bit before we finish today. And LMC 247, I'm sure Pickard will be back in goal for Arsenal, but did anyone else feel strangely relaxed with Olsen in goal when corners were going in? He didn't really have much to do, did he, lads? Olsen last night, so it's hard to get too much of a read on him, but he looks all right, doesn't he? Looks pretty composed, pretty solid.
I think that's what you need from a backup keeper.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably what we've been looking for a backup keeper for so long, and it's just that we haven't really been able to trust Jonas Lossell. Obviously, Java Jr. is a very young goalkeeper, so he's probably in a bit of a different boat. But Robin Olsen's obviously come in, and he is just that calming influence when he's behind the defence. He didn't really need to do all that much, but I think he claimed his crosses really well. He dealt with that. I think Vardy hit his header straight at him almost, but I think he still dealt with that very well. But that was essentially really the only thing that he had to deal with in terms of shots on target. So yeah, I think it was just a confident, sort of composed performance. But I don't think it should be forgotten that in the last couple of games, I think Jordan Pickford played really, really well, and I've been confident enough with him in goal as well. So this is what we've been aiming for all this time. Like, obviously, we've got to this point so many times with Pickford where you're thinking to yourself, oh, is this the time where he can just be consistent now from this point on? And I've got past the point of trying to predict whether that's going to be the case or not. But I think he's got better conditions to try and do that now than he ever has at Everton, because he has got this, consistent backup behind him. He's got, somebody to bounce off even in training. It seems that, they can just strike up a good rapport with each other. And, I think that's only going to help us in the long run. And, I wouldn't be opposed to rotating goalkeepers, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Have you been impressed with him, Mike?
Yeah, I thought I think surprisingly, he's quite good with his feet as well. That's quite a big thing that Pickford gets pointed out for. But last night he was fine. Jamie Vardy with putting on the pressure. He can cause quite a bit of panic for goalkeepers, but he didn't seem to flinch at all. And I have a feeling he'll start on Wednesday next week.
Yeah, I think he might do as well in that United game.
I think last night was almost. Without, obviously, goalkeepers don't really get rested, but I think it was a way of Ancelotti going, I want to see, because I want to play you on Wednesday. This is your chance to prove that, to confirm the idea. Basically, I think we'll see Pickford on Saturday, and then Olsen will come back in next week against United.
Yeah, interesting stuff. We'll leave it there, lads. Just final question. So we decided, we haven't really decided that Everton are going to play on Saturday, but are they going to beat Arsenal 1-0 or 4-0, lad?
Are they the only two options?
This is all going to come back to bite me, of course, but I just think it's going to go.
I just can't see 3 clean sheets in a row, to be honest.
Yeah.
Even with the best will in the world, I just can't see 3 clean sheets in a row. I'm going to go for a fairly close 2-1.
That's what I was going to go for as well, 2-1.
Yeah.
There we go. Take that. Yeah, be made up with that, absolutely. But yeah, cheers to the lads for coming on tonight. Really enjoyed that chat. Thanks everyone for getting involved on YouTube. If you are listening on usual podcast apps, so give us a rating, give us a review, all that kind of thing. And if you want to hear more from us, as ever, we are on Patreon, patreon.com/The Blue Room Extra. But yeah, we'll speak to you again later in the week. We'll kick about and with instant reactions to that game against Arsenal at the weekend.